that's not just Bitcoin. And sure, maybe some of these things are dollar denominated, but for example, there are many businesses that sell products in non-dollar denominated currencies globally. And while they report and trade on US stock exchanges, you're buying a security interest in a business that generates most of its income.
You're referring
by selling,
to Apple?
I'm referring to many different companies.
Yeah.
And so there are many companies that get the bulk of their revenue, the bulk of their sales internationally. There are also many companies that will benefit in an inflationary environment, businesses that are tied to other types of real estate, businesses that are tied to certain capital equipment where consumption will not go down unless there's, significant, massive, global socioeconomic shock. And so I think that that's kind of a lot of what's going on right now. It's less about, hey, Bitcoin's the only place to go and be safe. And it's more about, let me reallocate my risk assets a little bit, to places that may may benefit from, or may be better guarded from a massive kind of inflationary shock. And let me say one more thing. I think one of the biggest risks that is not being talked about is the debt ceiling vote that's due in June. In June, Congress needs to pass an increase in the debt ceiling because the amount of debt that the federal government is going to have to take on in order to meet our budget deficit and refinance our debt and pay our obligations historically means that we're going to have more than what we've approved to date in terms of the total amount of debt. Now, this has historically been a last minute vote, crazy dramatic thing that drives markets nuts. The Hill had a public opinion piece from Peter O'Rourke and Mary Spaeth, but I think they make a good point. I've talked to a lot of folks who are, call it in the fixed income market, but also folks who are in the equities markets publicly who are pretty nervous about this debt ceiling vote. And if it does look like the Republican Party takes a very hard line and says, because this is the current party line, if you don't agree to massive deficit cuts or spending cuts and really commit to that in a bill that we can pass that then also approves the increase in the debt limit, we are not going to approve increasing the debt limit. And what this opinion piece argues, I think, is a very good middle of the line solution, which is come up with points of view and actually document those points of view on making sure that government spending is effectively accountable, that there's no more wasteful spending, and that there are certain programs that both parties can very quickly agree to as being very wasteful. And if you start there, you maybe get enough across the line that both parties kind of say, this makes sense, let's do this. And then we can kind of increase the debt limit. Because in the absence of that, the U.S. will have to default on debt. This is always the big threat. It's never happened. And if that happens, or there is the looming threat of that happening, combined with the banking crisis, combined with the liquidity crisis, combined with the real estate crisis that may be emerging here.
Let me ask you a question that's
you could have things really melt down. So I think this is the biggest black swan. It's not a black swan, but this is the biggest kind of elephant in the room right now. I think if people in DC could get together today, and if you could, instead of doing the typical last minute 24-hour vote a day before the debt ceiling needs to be increased,
be thoughtful and do it now.
If this could be addressed today, it could start to put in some of the layers of backstop and coverage and protection and safety that the markets, I think, really need to manage some of the trepidation in the weeks and months ahead.
I want to jump to the crypto crackdown and get your opinion on that, Sachs, first, but I want to do a clarifying point here with Freeberg. You have been in the Ray Dalio end of Empire's collapse, and that, hey, maybe the U.S. is winding down its supremacy, and Balaji was pretty much saying, yep, this